Shalom. This is Ronit Ziv Krieger, Education Director at the JWRP. Today I'm excited to co-present this webinar with my friend and colleague, Adrian Gold. In honor of the upcoming holiday of Rosh Hashanah, this month's value is emunah, faithfulness and trust. One way you could put these values into action would be to invite a beloved speaker, perhaps a rebbetzin or a community member, to share a personal story that connects to these values. This could include a question and answer session. In addition, you might wish to combine or dovetail this session with a talk by a mindfulness expert on how to notice and attend to our inner selves and how to connect to the world around us with a meaningful presence. Or you may invite a participant to begin the session by leading the group in some stretching and mindful breathing to help cultivate deeper awareness of our mind, body, soul connection. In Hebrew, the word for soul and for breath come from the same root. Breath is neshima and soul is neshama. Every conscious breath can be a soulful reminder of spiritual living. Before the session begins, consider preparing the room by putting out apples and honey or any Rosh Hashanah inspired treats for your group to enjoy. On Rosh Hashanah, we dedicate ourselves to faithfulness and trust. We prepare by contemplating the year that has gone by, the improvements we've made in our character and actions, and the challenges that still face us. As Rosh Hashanah tunes and liturgy reawaken us to our potential, we strive to remain God-conscious and inspired in the coming year. Emunah, this session's value, is associated with opening our eyes to such soul-awakening moments of wonder and transcendence that are often lost behind the blur and busyness of our everyday lives. It is also about a deliberate practice of noticing moments of transcendence and then acting from such an awareness, faithful to the essence of who we are, to our deepest calling, to God.
For many of us, Israel was a soul awakening moment in and of itself. Having 8 days of space to focus on personal development and meaning was a luxury few of us mothers ever afford ourselves. It created the space for us to have open hearts and open minds, and as a result, have those aha moments naturally. Whether we were standing on top of Masada or glimpsing the Kotel for the first time, there was a time where our hearts quickened, our breath drew in wonder. Those moments, they are the gateway to Emunah, as they give us a glimpse of the divine by transporting us from the everyday, even if it's only for a moment.
Sometimes our everyday lives are so busy, it can be a challenge to stop and notice moments of awe that occur. Yet there's certain times in life when you encounter something that awakens your soul, that brings you to a consciousness of beauty and awe that goes beyond the day-to-day. On page 4, you could have your group read together Lori Palatnik's words on soul awakening moments that lift us out of this world and that are God's way of showing us that we are not just bodies, but souls. Tell a personal story or invite a co-facilitator to tell a personal story about a soul awakening experience. As a group, discuss the questions Lori poses at the end of this piece. What have been some soul awakening moments in your life? Did any of those soul awakening moments lead you to new decisions or actions?
One day, I was sitting in my living room, reading a book and drinking a glass of cold wine. It was one of those perfect moments of solitude, doing what I love best, disappearing into a novel and sipping on some Chardonnay. It was bliss. So I had this gorgeous bouquet of tulips right on the table before me, a deep, glowing yellow, and they were in full bloom, open and yawning into the afternoon light, straining their stems towards that meager sunlight that came in through a nearby window. And as I looked up, and for what reason, I'm not sure, I saw a petal silently drift to the table, spiraling slowly from its bloom as though it was in slow motion. I drew in a breath. It was as though I was witnessing something sacred, something you never see happening, but you notice only, once the petals have hit the table. I've had that sensation before, when my son's head was crowning during childbirth. A sense of wonder that life was actually moving from one dimension to another, and that I was facilitating that. Another time I was driving in the country, lost without directions, and I turned a corner and I suddenly saw this massive field of sunflowers ahead of me. There were thousands of them, nodding their oversized heads to the sun. It was like a sea of golden sunlight, and again I gasped. I felt like a curtain had parted, and I'd truly seen beauty in its distilled and unadulterated form, and I was awed by it. In Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, there is a list of 48 ways to wisdom that's outlined in the 6th chapter of the 6th Mishnah. And one of those ways to wisdom is the ability to harness the power of awe. The power in your life to use that awe as fuel later on when you need it most. To capture those wow moments and turn them into transcendent experiences. We all find those moments in different places. For some of us, it might be while skiing, standing at the top of a mountain, or in front of the vastness of an ocean, feeling both tiny and also part of something huge all at the same time. And those moments, they're transcendental. And they're to be found in the small moments as well, all day long, once you train yourself to be able to see them everywhere. Building Amuna can come through mastering the art of awe and finding faithfulness that there's more to life than the mundane physical world, and searching it out, that's what makes the curtains part with more frequency. I remember the first time I worked out. I couldn't sit down for 3 days, and I said to my husband, "Who knew there's muscles in your backside?" And his response was an epiphany for me. He said, "I suppose one doesn't feel them unless one uses them." And so it is with the Emunah muscle. When you use it, when you truly use it, when you search for it, when you work that muscle out, it becomes part of your spiritual muscle, and you find all the knowledge you need to attach yourself to the creator of the universe. During our session on prayer in Israel, we discussed the idea that when we ask God something in the form of a prayer, whether it's a request or some beseeching, we expect that having one's prayers answered means that your request is granted. We forget that no, or even not now, is also an answer. So developing trust in Hashem and in others requires not having our trust contingent on outcome, but rather as a kind of operating system. What does that look like? Well, with our children, trusting them does not mean that they're not going to make mistakes or disobey. It can mean trusting that they have the tools to deal with those mistakes and repair or apologize when they damage a relationship. Trusting God is much like judging favorably. It means understanding that just as we do for people, we must also judge Hashem favorably. We trust that even when things do not go as we want, or are painful or difficult, that there's a bigger picture unfolding, and that all that happens to us is part of this great unfolding in the process of achieving greatness. Because greatness is not what happens to us. Rather, it's how we behave in the face of what happens to us. Emunah allows us to live by that motto and wrestle less with why and more with what now. While this session on Emunah is translated as faithfulness and trust, the question will inevitably arise as to whom or to what am I rendering my faithfulness? When the conversation about Emunah and faithfulness and God consciousness begins, one must acknowledge that every woman in the room has her own context, her own questions, her own concerns. The moment we speak about God, we come up against the preconceived notions and misguided descriptions of a concept that truly can't be understood. Certainly God is not that old man in the sky with his finger on the smoke button, and he's not the extended finger in the Sistine Chapel, and he certainly is not a man. Like a camera that can take a picture of everything but itself. The human mind is not equipped to fully comprehend the essence of the creator of the universe because it's outside of the physical realm, which is our only available operating system.
Fish swimming in water, with bodies comprised mostly of water, wouldn't fully comprehend the ocean even if their brains were more developed. Sometimes it can be difficult to describe soul awakening moments or God consciousness. Help facilitate this process for your women by using the images found on pages 6 through 9. For some groups, it may be best to begin with this activity, as it can help participants access God consciousness without much resistance. You can use the images in the booklets or print them out from the attached document so that you can spread out the pictures on a table. Invite the women to take 3 minutes in silence to look at the image and reflect for themselves quietly on soul awakening moments, on where they access God consciousness in their lives. Then invite them to choose of the images one to share about. What drew them to the image? What soul awakening moment of divine presence it reminds them of? Such an opening circle in your session could help even the playing field, offering a safe space for those who don't usually speak about God or spirituality, to allow even them to express where in their life they experience God consciousness. Remember that you know your group best, and that Jewish tradition guides us that there is no one word or idea that truly captures the infinite. There are many ideas. On the high holidays, we sing the 13 attributes of God. The Kabbalah tells us there are 10 manifestations of God. Some say that every word in the Torah is a name of God. But really, the idea is there is no one way to capture the infinite in words. If the word God or any other term gets in the way for some of your women, be sensitive to use a variety of alternative terms over the course of the session. Close this kind of circle or activity with the images by reflecting on how we might support other members of our family and ourselves more often to open to more conscious awareness of these soul awakening moments in our day-to-day lives.
We can each figure out how to harness the essence of those experiences in moments of time within our schedules. We must schedule in our calendars appointments where we put ourselves briefly back into that consciousness. You know, in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers, we're told that we're meant to have a set daily time or weekly time devoted to learning about Jewish wisdom. It's in keeping those appointments that builds the Emunah muscle and reinforces the all-important self-care that we need to be modeling for our children. Whether you do this at home or on your lunch break, find a half an hour at least each week and envision the aha moment you had while you were on the trip. That moment will open the gates of awe and allow you to be open to some learning or study while putting yourself in the Israel mindset. Give the women a few minutes during the session to conjure up that moment for themselves. Invite them to jot down a trigger sentence or an image that will be their back to Israel feeling mantra. Then, ask them to write down 2 different ways and 2 different times where harnessing the strength of that pleasurable moment could be used and made useful. Explain to the women that when one becomes an expert in harnessing the power of awe, they're able to self-modulate, to control anger, and to calm easier. This way, Amuna is built through one's own practice and is reinforced by one's own improved life.
As a group, read aloud Ruchi Koval's skydiving story, in which she speaks of the beauty of letting go, trusting in God, and enjoying the ride of life. After reading aloud, explore the questions and take time to reflect together on how to be of service, how to emulate God as we let go, stepping in to be a support to those in our family and a community who are in need of help. Next, split the women into pairs and have them read and discuss with their partners Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch's explanation and commentary on Genesis, found on page 12. Ask the pairs to discuss together Rabbi Hirsch's distinction between belief and emunah in the context of Ruchi's story and through the lens of their own lives and experience to help clarify this distinction. Then come together as a group and hear from each pair to talk this through. To gain a deeper understanding of the concept of emunah, you might want to consider other Hebrew words that stem from the same root. The word for artist, oman; for loyal, ne'iman; for coach or trainer, me'amen; for trust and confidence, emun; and the word for a practice, imun. Each of these involves a steadfast commitment, a discipline that helps. Emunah often begins with soul awakening moments and then develops through sticking with a practice that grows our commitment. But it's not only individuals who express emunah. Communities and even countries can too. On page 14 and 15, there's a moving piece written by Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel just after the Six-Day War in June 1967. This would be a perfect opportunity for a couple of your participants to lead a conversation. Prior to the session, you can ask 1 or 2 women to lead this short segment on Elie Wiesel's 1967 column about the Six-Day War. You can ask them to engage in the group in a conversation about how we can experience both personal and communal moments of awe and commitment and perseverance to do the right thing. As mothers, we know in our hearts how sensitive our children can be to the beauty and burdens of life, and we're always on the lookout for ways to help them develop resilience. Scientific researchers are discovering the benefits of children's spirituality as a source of strength throughout their lives. One of those scientists is Dr. Lisa Miller, Director of Clinical Psychology at Columbia University Teachers College, a leading scientist in the now blooming field of spirituality, psychology, and thriving. I encourage you to introduce this Learn with Your Sister section, underscoring Dr. Miller's work on nurturing spirituality in children and how it can benefit the whole family. For some groups, you might actually want to bring this piece into a group conversation. For others, invite the women to return to this Learn with Your Sister material independently with a partner over the coming weeks. In every session of the Year of Growth series, we have included a Try It Out section, practical tips and resources for families. On page 22 through 25, you'll find this Try It Out section. Help the women bring the learning they've done today home to their families in interesting and fun ways. Encourage them to choose one thing they will do with their families and come back next time and report on how it went. And now it's time to wrap up the session. Summarize the main ideas explored in the session and highlight some of the comments and questions that were made. Ask each woman to share one takeaway from this session. You could ask them to finish the sentence, "After this time together, I now commit to..." Remind participants that this is the end of the in-class time together, but the learning will go on with the Learn with Your Sister sessions. Encourage the women to commit to their learning partner sessions, even if only for a little bit each week. Let the women know when and where the next session about joy of welcoming guests will take place. And ask who's interested in co-leading some of the session with you. Please share highlights and a photo from your session and encourage your participants to post reflections from the session and pictures in the Year of Growth Facebook page. I'd like to close with thanking my friend Adrian Gold for co-presenting this webinar with me and helping to work on the session itself. And to all the other friends and colleagues who helped develop this session with me, including Eliza Sperling, Jen Fechter, and Chaya Lester. Special thanks to you, the fantastic and dedicated city leader, for bringing the inspiration and the teaching to your participants in ways that help them transform self, family, community, and ultimately the world. I'm always interested in hearing constructive feedback about how to make the Year of Growth sessions and these webinars better. I would appreciate hearing from you and gaining the benefit of your wisdom.